Terry?
Yep.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our breakout session called The New Institutional Lens. We're going to be just doing an overview of day 2 of Bridges Out of Poverty. And this is for the Addressing the Challenges of Poverty conference, which hopefully will be held live, you know how things go, in San Antonio this September 2020. And so 2021, I don't want to go back to 2020, do we? So we are continuing, and hopefully we'll be able to see some of you in person as well at that session. I'm Terry Drucy Smith. I am one of the co-authors of Bridges Out of Poverty and have been a consultant and speaker with AHA Process since 1999, not showing my age too much, I hope. And co-presenting with me today is Susie Johnson-Smith. And Susie is a Bridges champion at the institutional level, and she is also a national consultant for AHA Process for Bridges Out of Poverty. And for several years, she has been leading her team and other organizations to embed the Bridges lens for organizational change. So I look at her as a Bridges champion of institutional or organizational change. And she is located and works in social services as a supervisor and leader in the city and county of Peterborough, Ontario. So she wants to say hi.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Terry.
Yeah, great. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And let's begin, because we have about an hour to tell you about a lot. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to review the Bridges model triple lens, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And this session is actually for people who are more advanced and knowledgeable and have been using the Bridges lens for a while. So you probably have heard of that, but if not, and you're new, it hopefully will give you some motivation to say, okay, once you get that feeling of, okay, aha, I see the Bridges lens, but now what do I do? What do I do at the institutional level, the community level? How do I change my interpersonal relationships and my professional relationships based on this information? So we're going to look at that triple lens, and we're going to focus on, of course, the institutional lens today. We're going to explore the next steps to grow a strong Bridges organization, and we've got some pretty exciting things in that area to share with you. So here's the Bridges model. It's taken about 20 years to develop this, and I think it looks like a castle. But as you can see, in the beginning, people were thinking, well, is Bridges just about how you interact with individuals? And we began to see more and more people embedding it into their institutions and organizations and getting better outcomes, and in their community to reduce the barriers so that people can transition out of poverty, and using getting ahead, of course, in that. And across the board here, I think that one of the things we see in the Bridges constructs is that we have to look at our own societal lens. What do we view? What are our expectations of others, and how people should, quote unquote, behave, and what is all of that about? What do we get triggered by when somebody does this or that, or breaks a hidden rule, if you will? And so we look at this as, how do we look at our own societal lens, as well as how do we engage people in poverty at the decision-making table? So we'll be focusing on this green column in the middle for this presentation, which is the organizational or institutional lens. And as you can see, it starts out the bottom with board selection and institutional training. And then, so I'll be talking about that in a moment. And it goes up through, how do you manage your cases? And do you use a traditional case management style or a transitional case management style? Susie will be talking a lot about that later. And what's the ROI and return on investment? What's the power of using the Bridges lens within organizations? One thing that we know after all of these years is there are many Bridges communities. There are very few Bridges communities that are Bridges champions and use our work to do amazing things, who don't have Bridges champions at the organizational level also within the community. And it's almost becoming an indicator that if you don't have organizations who have embedded the Bridges lens and become Bridges organizational champions, it's going to be a lot tougher to build that Bridges community and that Bridges steering committee and so forth. So this is such a key and important piece. It's sort of like the step between the aha moment and how do we engage people respectfully from all economic classes to how do we actually begin to move people and to help folks in our communities have more sustainability. So we call this change readiness. And I think that as we've talked about this, we don't want everybody to just go, okay, it's time to get our organization to use the Bridges lens. We need to prepare people for what happens when you begin to take that Bridges lens of the hidden rules, language, resources, the research continuum, and you actually line it up with your organization, begin to do some tight thinking and to actually, decide, okay, what are we actually doing and what is our theory of change? It sounds pretty complex, and we've tried to really make it into hands-on exercises and tools that organizations can use. And in the past, in the older institutional lens or day 2 of Bridges, I think it was more abstract. And now we've worked to make it more concrete and usable. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is before you would even begin to approach an organization, probably the organization in which you work, about, how do we line up? How do we see what we're doing now? How does the Bridges lens have an impact on that? What do we need to change? We need to first look at our own organizational ecosystem, or what we sometimes call the organizational culture. And one of the things we're looking for is information flow, not just from the top down, from the administrator to the supervisors to the frontline staff, but we have to have an ecosystem where information flows all ways. It goes laterally within each level, and it also goes top down, and then there's power from the front line back to influence change and policies and procedures within the organization. So the information flows both ways. Of course, we're thinking everyone needs to train all their staff and board members. Sometimes we forget our board members. Organizations sometimes say, oh, I want the frontline trained because they're the ones that touch people in poverty. Well, all of the programs, policies, procedures touch our clients who may be in poverty or different economic classes. So we need to have an understanding across the whole organizational structure. We want to work respectfully as a team to actually design or draw what's actually happening now in a client life cycle or a customer life cycle or patient life cycle. And we do this in a way that everyone can see it, and it's sort of a group mental model. Everyone draws it together. And then we decide, okay, what are we actually trying to do here? What are we trying to change? And how do we embed the spirit of motivational interviewing as part of the process? I think every organization wants to be a healthy organization. I was thinking about this earlier today. I think that with Bridges, if you have an organization that trains and believes in the Bridges concepts, you have a better shot at being able to work through this with humility and understanding, because the Bridges lens promotes humility and understanding. It's not about a power struggle. It's not about us telling our staff what to do. It's not about us telling clients or patients or students in poverty what needs to be done as the smart middle class. It's a matter of an exchange and building rapport rather than just going straight for the jugular of changing behavior because, you need to do this, 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 and this. That spirit of motivational interviewing we'll be talking about in just a moment. Your organization has to be willing to look at the way they are and to design and redesign and design that quality improvement across the board. So enough on that, but here's the spirit of motivational interviewing. The partnership spirit, where the interviewer or the listener, or that would be the case manager or the counselor or whoever is working with the client, the interviewer listener is an expert, but the customer or client is also an expert. The acceptance spirit, which is the deep appreciation of the dignity and worth of every individual and their worldview. And that's where Bridges comes into it. It's helping us to see the different worldviews and different experiences within different economic classes. So there's really no right or wrong worldview, is there? So being able to understand what our own worldview is and then saying, okay, how open are we? That's where the humility comes in, to us maybe not being quite right about everything in our worldview. The compassionate spirit prioritizes the person, the agenda of the person over the agency or organization's agenda. That's difficult to lay that down sometimes, but you have to seek first to understand what is important to this individual that you're working with. These things are not easy to to happen across the board, right? Because there's so many individuals with so many different worldviews working within an institution. So it takes a lot of conversation. It takes a lot of understanding. It takes a lot of training. And the last one is the evocative spirit, which draws out the customer's thoughts and ideas rather than imposing what the organization or the case manager or counselor or whomever, the nurse, the physician, that view is important, but it's not really as important as the thoughts of and ideas that are coming from the individual who needs to probably be making the change. So just briefly, here's an overview of the day 2 agenda. And I think we've talked about most of those things as I just went through that list of what is important about what we're talking about today. We are going to be looking at our institution's resources, whether or not our institution, and as in the tyranny of the moment, we talk about poverty being the tyranny of the moment because you're just surviving and sort of reacting to everything that's going on. Well, our organizations and our communities can get into that same situation, and we need to be able to recognize that and be able to analyze it and say, okay, how do we build resources together? So the first thing we're going to look at, and I'm going to give you a sneak peek at it. This is what a client life cycle looks like. And here's something we found online that is more, it's more readable, I guess. But you just take every part, from the very first moment that you encounter or engage your client, your student, your customer, even your employee. I mean, businesses can use this as well. So you're looking at all of that very first contact through the intake, the application, the orientation, right? The needs assessment, whether there are any referrals, and then that ongoing, many of our organizations have ongoing engagement. We call it case management, but it's really engagement at one point or another. And then sometimes there's discharge and referrals, and we'd have hopefully some retention, and just don't let those folks out and never come back again, although they may hopefully will want to still engage with us and maybe be part of our team that helps us to redesign how we design programs and policies that are more effective. So here's how we prepare for the client life cycle. And I think that one of the things that we talk about is before you would even do a Bridges Day 2, people in your organization actually need to be talking about the Bridges lens all the time, and sort of saying, hey, I found out, I had a hidden rule when this happened yesterday. I can't go into a lot of detail because we don't have much time here, but there are a lot of conversations within the organization about how to use the Bridges lens. And in this middle section, all the bullets there, there's a lot of truth seeking about our institutions in this second day. And so the people at the top and the people in the middle, like middle managers, have to be willing to lay everything out on the table with the frontline staff and be able to hear the frontline staff and what they're saying. I always say that if you seek to really hear and use the thoughts and get people in poverty to that decision-making table within your organization, the first step is to analyze, do we listen to our frontline staff when they have an idea about policies or programs? So we have to have that willingness for the administration to hear from that frontline staff and their ideas when they say, okay, let's draw this life cycle, and then you analyze it, and the frontline staff is saying, this part right here doesn't work, what could we change here? Whereas, you know, the middle manager has a vested interest in everything looking good in their department. So there's these little conflicts that you have to be able to get over. And I think the Bridges lens and that Bridges ecosystem that we're trying to develop here really helps the administration and the middle managers and everyone to not just say, okay, we can't do this, or it's too tough, or, you know, our driving force says we have to do it this way, we can't make changes. There's times that we can, there's places we can make changes, but we have to be able to work together to do it. So we don't want every organization to just run into this. It takes a lot of preparation. So this is the client life cycle. We call it the patient life cycle. And it's the very first thing that we do in this segment on drawing a client life cycle. So as you can see, this was done at one of our certified trainings in Nashville. It starts from the very first moment you call the doctor's office up there in the left-hand corner, and goes through how long does it take to get the appointment, how long does it take to arrive, or what's the transportation like, did you have to get childcare? And once you get there, you see the receptionist right there in the middle. How much paperwork is there? How long does that take? Then do you get to see the doctor? No, you have to wait 30 minutes, so forth, before anyone comes in. Usually it's a certified nurse assistant who's going to take your vitals, and so forth. So you go through this whole piece, and typically you see the doctor for 5 or 10 minutes, but you've been involved in this process as the patient for much longer than that. And so, you know, begin to look at, well, where can relationships be built? Where does the rapport begin to, and how are we doing on that engagement? How can we shorten the wait time, you know, so forth, those types of things. And look at it from the client or patient's point of view. So we look and think more broadly about our programs and services when we can actually draw out our own client life cycle. So typically what we do is we ask the organization to do the patient life cycle, so they get the idea of how to create a life cycle, how you draw it, and how you debrief it. And then you begin asking them to draw, okay, what are the actual processes that from the patient or client's point of view in your organization. And then after you look at it, you process it. And we use a mental model because it's just so powerful. Everybody can see exactly what's happening all together at the same time. And there are a lot of insights and a lot of conversation about those pieces. So from that, these are both Peter Drucker's ideas. Drawing the client life cycle and identifying your theory of change. I mean, what is it you're actually doing? For years, I've been doing the second day. I've been presenting the second day of Bridges. And I have found many organizations who have trouble identifying exactly what their theory of change is. I mean, what are we doing? If we do this, then what will happen? You know, so if we provide education, then people will, you know, follow through and have more stability in some areas in their life. What are we actually trying to do? So what we found was, in the past, it took a lot of time and effort, and we had a lot of people in the organization who couldn't agree on what their theory of change was. And so we thought we'd make it a little bit easier. So we're drawing now from the change that Phil Duvall identified in the Getting Ahead and Just Getting By world work group books. And so, you know, individuals in poverty are saying, well, when we're going to an organization, what is the organization offering us? What is the change that the organization is offering? So we thought these would give people a much better chunk of information to help identify their own theory of change. And typically, many organizations have more than one theory of change because we have such complex organizations that are doing so much. So, you know, so I think that the one that we see in E, in addictions, Phil and I, of course, worked in addictions for many years, is the sanctions model. And in certain addiction thinking, if it's painful or we feel personally threatened by the problem, then we'll be willing to change. So of course, we were trying to help people experience the consequences of their own use rather than, you know, someone enabling them. So definitely in our organizations, we would have had in the addiction organization that we are working in, we would have to identify the sanctions model and the education model and so forth. And so once you begin to see that and you see your client life cycle, you've got some solid concrete tools of the way it is right now in your organization. There's going to be some great things that you're doing, and there are also going to be some points where you might say, okay, these are hinge points where maybe we are not using the spirit of motivational interviewing, right? I mean, I'm not saying you have to use motivational interviewing here, but the spirit of motivational interviewing, the partnership piece of it, the respect, the humility piece of it, where can we tweak that up in our organization? And where are the red flags in those areas where we're most at risk of sort of losing people by, just kind of telling them what to do? So in summary, the theory of change is, this is Susie's piece. She says, who's doing the change talking? Is it the case manager in your organization who's saying, okay, here's what needs to happen? Or is there that spirit of who's doing the change talking? And a lot of times what happens is we realize that our organization is doing all of the change talking. And guess what? If that's true, a lot of times there's less change happening. And that's what we want, because you know what? Poverty throws a lot of barriers for individuals, for organizations who are working with individuals who have all the barriers of poverty coming through the door, and communities who are trying to reduce the impact of those barriers of poverty and help people to actually transition out of poverty. So we need to look at how do we do that? There are many people who say, oh, forget it, you're never going to be able to have people transition out of poverty. And what we know is that along with getting ahead and bridges, there are many people who are in transition out of poverty and have transitioned out of poverty. And some of you sitting there listening to this today may be those people as well. And so we are very excited about this whole process of looking at the institutional change. We also talk about the stages of change in motivational interviewing. And I think it's interesting here because when I saw this today, usually we ask when clients create a plan, we ask them to go back and say, well, where are you? Every week when they come back for the next session, and this is done in many getting ahead groups, where are you in terms of the stages of change? Are you not thinking about change? Are you ambivalent, meaning I want to, but I'm having difficulty? Are you preparation? Are you already taking action? Where are you with this? I think it's important for our organizations to do this as well, and to say, are we even thinking about changing now? Or are we thinking that we can't change? I think the organization also needs to go through the stages of change, not just expecting those that we're working with to, constantly remember this. But one thing that we know is if we do use this and people are reminded of it, as well as our organizations, it helps us to see that there is a change process that's normal. And everyone goes through it, or every institution has to go through it. And so it's just part of the change process. And we can take a break and say, okay, we went to action and we weren't prepared. So let's take a step backwards. And this happens a lot where this is very fluid and you just don't go straight through it and straight through to action and maintenance, right? But you might have to take some steps back and forth on this. And that kind of gives us encouragement. Sometimes our organizations are also in the tyranny of the moment and very reactive. This happens when there's funding, the funding is low, or the community may have had some hits in terms of jobs and revenue, and there may be more crime in a community. So if a community ends up in poverty, the institutions typically do too. And, many times we see funding cuts and so forth, and institutions are living grant to grant, and they're cutting professional development. There's a lot going on with salaries and, morale with the staff and so forth. And, I think we have to understand that this is going to have an impact on what we're doing and trying to accomplish with our goals and our objectives within that organization. It's not that we can't get out of the tyranny in the moment, but I think the first thing is to realize that we are not doing long-term planning when we're in the tyranny of the moment as an institution. We're kind of doing band-aids right? So I think that we tend to kind of blame people in poverty for being in the tyranny of the moment. And this helps us see institutions and communities can be in the same situation. It's a matter of reacting to the environment, the lack of resources. And there are ways to build those resources. Just really quickly, we let organizations analyze in what ways are we using a fixed it approach, in what ways are we using a motivational approach. And then we start to look at the institution and the resources of the institution. And are we bringing or building resources with the individuals who come through our doors, or the groups, or the families? Are we offering just get by resources that are short term or band-aid, or are we working together in our community? Many times it helps us if we have partnerships to build resources over the long term. And of course, in Bridges, we're all about the long term and about that engagement and building resources together, actually being led and directed by the individuals and families who we're working with to help transition. So we have the 11 resources for stability, and those of you that know the resources, they are typically your financial resources, which obviously can be individual or as an institution, your mental capacity, your ability to cope with challenges, your physical health, which sometimes can even be considered your software and how you're doing with your technology, and whether you're up to date with that in your organization, and also your relationships within the organization, within the community, and with those that you're working with. And we know that we see silos a lot. And we just want to bang those silos and say the silos need to come down, and we begin to work together and not be so selfish about our funding and our goals and objectives and our particular evaluation piece, but to share that across the community with that sort of impact model, collaborative impact model that we saw come out of Stanford University. So just briefly, at this point, we take the Bridges lens, which, let me remind you, would be the hidden rules, drawing mental models of economic class, resource building, language structures, the research continuum, the Bridges constructs. And now we take all of the Bridges lens and we put you in groups in this organization, right? As an organization sitting at tables and doing the tight thinking along with humility of how do we really embed the Bridges lens and look at what we're doing in our client lifecycle, our theory of change, look at what we're actually doing right now, and how do we embed the Bridges lens. And so we have a lot of exercises that help you do that. This piece is very hands-on. So we say, which Bridges constructs are you using? Which of these community, which of the research continuum do we provide in our community? Are we changing individuals' behavior? Are we building community resources? This would be the human and social capital. Are we seeking to reduce exploitation? Or are we changing political and economic structures? So typically, this is typically we see that most of our institutions are in the first two columns, seeking to build individual assets with folks in our community and those who may be in poverty environments, and then building our community resources as well. And we're kind of leaving the exploitation of political and economic structures alone. We need to collaborate so that we can get all four of these addressed. So there are usually organizations within your state, your county, your city or town who are working on some of these, but not all. And so we try to work together so that we can get more of them across the board to be addressed. That's how we reduce poverty. Which set of hidden rules does your work and agency use? What hidden rules are being brought in by the clients, students, and patients that you serve? And we're talking about economic class hidden rules, but this can also branch out into other areas as well. And is our program respectful, or are we insisting that the hidden rules of the organization are the right hidden rules? Then we look at the paperwork, we look at how people communicate, we look at nonverbal communication. And this is kind of a fun part, and it's like maybe where you might start because it's more obvious. And we begin to look at how we're communicating both in the written word as well as whether it's oral or all written. We find a lot of times people may be literate, but they're just not reading all the fine print that we sent out and all our brochures and so forth. So how do we really communicate effectively? Then we have 2 questionnaires. So my time is about up, but we have 2 questionnaires that we've introduced. One is, what are the resources of your institution? And the other one that's really exciting for us is your organization a Bridges organization? So what this does is it gives you sort of a yardstick. So if you took a Bridges organization, this is what it would look like. And then you get to say, analyze, where are we in terms of our organization? And you might actually find that you've done quite a few things right and that you're on your way to becoming a Bridges institution or Bridges organization. But this sort of leads the organization in the path of what's it look like? What are you talking about? What's it look like to be a Bridges institution or Bridges organization? I think this is one of the best tools that we have come up with in ages. It's so concrete that I think any organization can look at this and see exactly where they are and where they want to move. Again, if they're attracted, if your organization is attracted to the Bridges work and the Bridges lens and inspired by the many champions. We have individual champions too, but we also have institutional and community champions that are so inspiring and have just been building such wonderful innovative programs and policies for for decades actually. And Susie and I are so proud to be a part of that. So we are looking at this entire piece as, how do we line up as a Bridges organization? What can we change? And you know what? We think it's ongoing, that there are many things in day 2. If you're not like totally ready to change the whole organization, you can do this in stages. It gives the organization some goals and objectives on how to become a Bridges organization. This is Mike Saccoccio is the founder of Schenectady Bridges and one of the best hearts that we know, but he's also very brilliant and he's an inspiring leader, and they have done tremendous things with Bridges in Schenectady. And he says there are no data sets that measure heart, but I think that you will see better outcomes if you are able to use the Bridges lens in ways that you're engaging people more respectfully with humility. You're going to see those outcomes change. So I'm not saying I disagree with him, but I am saying that when you're working with folks in poverty, they may not care about your data, but they're going to care about your genuine sincerity and your heart. And the more we can embed that, the more successful we're going to be together. I'm going to turn this over to Susie because she's got some really specific information on how this actually works within an organization that I'm just so excited about. We might take a second for Susie to share her screen and for me to stop sharing my screen.
Perfect. Thank you,
and there we are.
Terry.
Thank you, Susie.
See here what we're doing. You can just let me know if you see that okay. Okay. Is that up?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. All right. Thanks, Terry. So Terry so beautifully walked us through in a very short amount of time to deepen your understanding of the triple lens and how we can keep moving that needle of impact with the Bridges model and the Bridges work. And then walked you through, as she mentioned, how proud we are of the day 2 material, the institution lens. I think it really is really impactful for organizations to keep on their Bridges journey and keep embedding and exploring their organizational structures all around. And so now my part is to explore next steps for you and share a little bit of what's happening in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada, the journey that we've been on over the last 5 to 6 years in embedding bridges. And it does start with that day one material of really understanding your own societal lens all around as an organization, staff, leaders, every point of contact within your organization. One of the key fundamental pieces, after we embedded and used the bridges training to really look at our organizational structures, our policies, and our procedures. So, using all of the information that Terry just shared with you to really analyze and investigate your current structures within your department or your division, using the bridges model. All of the day-do material helps to support you concretely in doing that. In Peterborough, as we were doing that, we started to embark on this realization that, for years we had been talking about a client-centered organization and being client-centered at the heart of everything that we do. And while that is true, one of the things that we really recognized was that in order to really truly apply bridges at the institutional lens, to really be successful in shifting our fundamental view of one another, the clients we serve, whole philosophical approach to service delivery was to actually start with how we were engaging our not only our clients, but our employees and one another, our peers, our colleagues, from leader to staff, from staff to staff, all around, as well as to the client. So having leadership invest in the relationships with their team members and their staff that were reporting to them to the same degree that we are expecting our caseworkers to engage their clients. So becoming and shifting to a people-centered organization versus client-centered. So the client is still at the heart of all the work that we do, but really shifting and looking at relationships all around the organization from every level and becoming a people-centered organization and engaging employees very heartfeltly through this process of coaching for life stabilization and applying bridges at a foundational level. One of the pieces with that of becoming people-centered as opposed to client-centered is this real fundamental shift. A quote that I made up along the way, but it really stuck with our organization, is that we don't give up on people, whether that's client or whether that's staff, that from coach to client or coach to staff, we just simply don't give up on people, that we believe that people have their own wholeness and their own resourcefulness. They're the experts in their own life, no matter what role or what hat they're wearing, whether it be service user or service provider or decision maker, and that we simply don't give up on one another, and we help to continue to have a future focus and move forward on helping one another grow, from client to staff, leader, and all around. So with that shift, we really needed to recognize that we had to shift from transactional case management. For those of you that have been in any sort of social assistance or social services organizations, and I'm aging myself to say that I've been in this business for about 30 years now, that our case management was very transactional in nature. So not always a lot of benefit to the client. Oftentimes we had to cross our T's, dot our I's, do the paperwork that was needed. And there was a fundamental belief. We were trained this way. So it wasn't through fault of staff or any of us that started this way, that we were trained to be very transactional in nature, in that we were fixers, we were problem solvers. We had the knowledge to help the customer to fix the issue. And we focused on the topic instead of the person, if that makes sense. And so we really focused on problem solving and fixing for sometimes clients' issues. And there's a time and a place for crisis management, but that's not truly coaching. And so we had to shift from transactional, really being, thinking that we're having a strong writing reflex, fixing issues for our clients, leading the way in goal setting, leading the way in building resources, and as Terry mentioned earlier, using sanctions and monitoring and social assistance to ensure that clients were compliant. And if they didn't agree to the goals that we were setting for them, then they were called non-compliant. We needed to really shift that in becoming more people-centered to transformational case management. And this is a work in progress for us. I mean, we're not there yet. It's completely a work in progress, but we're making headway in really adopting a coaching culture of transformational case management, where we actually believe that the clients are insightful, that they're the experts in their own lives, and we are their champion to help them navigate this game of life and help them reach their preferred future and be at their best self. And that staff can benefit from that, from their supervisor to them, as well as if they feel it and experience that coaching relationship where they come first and their goals matter, then we also have, we're modeling that as leaders to the staff. And again, a work in progress, but we are modeling that where we believe that everyone has some level of wholeness, wellness, and can prioritize their own barriers and resources. Historically, we in transactional case management, we really decided what the main issue was, what the main goal was. The client helped us navigate that, of course. I'm not saying we were in complete control, but we really did focus on goal setting, and we didn't break it down to what some of the barriers to change were. And really looking at our theory of change, the barriers to change for that individual, and working on the elements within the barriers to change that are within their control. And that's some true coaching techniques to shift again from transactional to transformational. And that the role of the coach really is about assistance, support, assistance, championing with the customer, the client, or the student, and exploring their life, their situation, using MI, using motivational interviewing, and other change models, and moving away from sanctions and monitoring, moving away from referencing clients as unmotivated when they were not motivated for the same thing that we are. And instead really working on what motivated them, what their preferred future was, and then breaking down the goals to being much more attainable for them on the areas that are within their control. So this is our work in progress of shifting from transactional to transformational, using a coaching model and using the Bridges model as our foundation. Terry and I like this picture of really just depicting what I just verbally said for you around that shift of trying, because that has been the fundamental core to our current success and our ongoing success. Again, it's like a big ship that we're moving, and we're trying to make sure that we're managing that change, because we have all levels of understanding and experience of our staff, a really large department. And so another fundamental piece that we've been saying along the way is not only do we not give up on people, but nobody gets left behind. And so in this shift of transformational people-centered case management structure, that we don't leave anyone behind, that we don't give up on one another, and that we truly have a people-centered coaching culture, strength-based coaching culture. So then that led us to not only, again, applying all the things that Terry just talked to you about, and all the things around looking at our policies, our programs, our procedures, our hidden rules, our written material, all of those concrete things that the institutional lens gives us to be able to have and use the checklist for, and give us a sense of a work plan. The questionnaires are really helpful to help organizations have sort of a strategic direction and a work plan in building the Bridges model within their organization and continuing to move that needle of impact. I'm talking about some of the softer things that were harder to capture, and in shifting our philosophical approach to case management, to client service, and to our coaching culture as an organization. So we really started to explore some of these questions you see in front of us for all levels of staff, decision makers, leaders, supervisors, reception, case managers, employment counselors, everyone, that we started to ask, and through the Bridges workshop, we started to really explore, what's our own societal lens through that cognitive framework that you learn about in the day one material, really honoring and understanding our own societal lens, our own cognitive framework, and how do we use that in every aspect of our work, not just with our clients, but with one another, with our colleagues, with our family, outside of work, etc. So really taking responsibility for our own societal lens and being open and respectful and honoring the societal lens of everyone else around us. And so awareness is key, and recovering to this, acceptance and moving into honoring and respecting where we're all coming from. Again, I talked about the people-centered organization, but that's been a real crucial shift. And so I'm trying to share the next steps of becoming a strong bridges organization, and shifting our mindset from client-centered to people-centered has been really crucial for us. And, you know, do I believe in the individuals you're working with, whether you're supervising them, working next to them, or working with them from a client caseworker relationship? Do you actually believe in one another? Do you believe that there is a sense of wholeness and wellness, and that the client is that individual, sorry, is an expert in their own life? And do we use people-centered approaches with our clients and with one another? So really challenging the way we have conversations, the way we resolve conflict, the way we put things on the table, the way we create our teams, the way we have open dialogue, and the way that we just approach and have conversation and communicate with one another. Again, using all of the bridges information about honoring, respecting our societal lens, but really checking ourselves on all the elements that you see in front of us. So this is sort of everyone as a whole in the organization. Then we move to our direct front line that we're working with clients one-on-one, of really challenging and putting on the table the fundamental view of your clients. Do you view the clients as less than you, as not naturally creative, as not able to solve their own issues? Do you think that you have to fix their issues for them? And again, that awareness piece is key. If we notice it and are aware of it, then we can move into more of a recovery stage, but we have to put it on the table first. Do I believe, again, that the client is whole and able to resolve their own elements? And a lot of this we're learning and have learned through the Coactive Training Institute coaching model. So in combination with the Bridges workshops and normalizing bridges, we also adopted a coaching culture where one of the cornerstones is actually believing that individuals are naturally resourceful, creative, and whole. Do we believe in our clients? Do we believe in each other? Do we believe in our staff? Are we making deposits into that relationship bank of our clients and our coworkers? We learned that in day one bridges around the analogy of using the thought of it being a bank account or a piggy bank, and intentionally making deposits into the relationship bank of everyone around us. Are we first, as Terry mentioned, one of my biggest pet peeves is, are we changing rapport with the clients, or are we actually trying to change behaviors first? Who's change talking first? What are we working on first? Are we going straight into fix-it mode to change behaviors before we actually have rapport? Because then there's going to be a disconnect and we're not going to be successful 9 times out of 10 anyhow. Am I shifting from traditional transactional case management to transformational life stabilization coaching? And this is a tough journey. We have trained people to be transactional case managers, paperwork, intakes, being the expert, being the fixer. We were all trained that way, myself included. So shifting out of fixing mode and into transformational life stabilization coaching is a huge venture that our organization is undertaking. But it's quite beautiful to see happening and unfolding as we work through the hiccups and the unlearning and the relearning of how to truly coach. When we truly coach in a case management relationship, using a real solid coaching foundation, we're actually not working harder than the clients. And so we're championing them to be the experts and make the changes in their own life. And we're a thinking partner with them, but we're not working harder than them. And in traditional case management, sometimes we were working harder than the clients were. And so this has been a huge shift in the way we've approached our case management style, our approaches, our thoughts about it, and really, again, unlearning some of the things that we were taught for years and years. And then we move into our leadership. And again, one of the fundamental pieces to this has been that we recognize that our leadership, our direct supervisors of the case management staff, of the staff who are working directly with clients in that capacity, need to be modeling coaching, need to view also their staff and their direct reports as equal to them, the same way that we're wanting the workers to view their clients. So again, a people-centered culture all around, not simply client-centered, because quite frankly, there's nothing worse than a leader who leads old style of, I'm the boss, more dictator type, but then saying to the worker, be really client-centered and, people-centered and all that with your client. So modeling it and having the worker feel how powerful that can be when you're same size circles, when you're in a same size relationship, when you're an equal partner in the relationship, is so powerful to empower the workers to feel it and experience it, and then hopefully turn around and do the same thing with their clients. So again, the modeling and the importance of the modeling, what we want them to do with their clients, making deposits into those relationship banks at all times, whenever possible, intentional deposits. Again, leading with that people-centered approach, and modeling transformational coaching, and and admitting that we're all unlearning and relearning. When I was first trained years ago as a supervisor, I wasn't trained to be a people-centered coach. It was very much like I needed to have the answers to the questions that the staff were asking. So that's a shift as well for us to unlearn the way that we've typically led to our teams and move into more transformational coaching with everyone around us so that we're modeling it. And really involving both staff and clients in the decision-making process. At our division, we have created a client advisor group where we have, many of them are Getting Ahead grads actually, who come together usually quarterly. Of course, COVID has, hindered that a little bit, but we still have been gathering on Zoom, where we have the clients and they're paid a stipend to come join us and review our programs and services and changes that we're thinking about making, where we can ask them if the marketing material, does it interest them? Would you go to this workshop? What are we missing? Here's an idea we have. We've had them test out websites and new information that we're launching as far as digital. So involving the clients in every capacity wherever possible through our client advisory group in that decision-making process, and to give us advice before we firmly move forward with new programs, new services, and decisions on behalf of them. We've learned such an incredible amount from our clients. And the other element is really involving staff in becoming truly people-centered. So having several working groups, we have a lot of them because we've been embarking on this transformation. So important for us as we're renewing and reviewing all of our coaching material, that we're using the same material again from supervisor to staff as we are with the staff to the client. And so really involving staff and looking at all the tools that we're using to become a people-centered coaching culture all around, and involving the clients in our decision-making around our programs and services. And that has probably been some of the biggest powerful shifts that we've been making as a Bridges champion and trying to grow a strong Bridges organization. So I was happy to share some of those elements. I also wanted to share just before we wrap up is this was sort of our work plan, and we built it around the model that Terry showed you at the very beginning, the Bridges model that you saw with the 3 lenses and then the overarching policy changes. And so we built it around using that to really start to work on what are we doing at the individual lens, institutional lens, and community lens. And so I've focused and highlighted on the institutional lens to just make sure that we haven't missed anything. And Terry touched on adapting the way we communicate. So reviewing all of our written material, really responding to the tyranny of the moment that our clients are in by bringing in we have a drop-in case manager at our reception desk. So we'll, try and put out the fire quickly with the client so that they aren't sent away, but book a follow-up appointment with their worker for the ongoing coaching relationship. Acknowledging change talk, listening for that change talk wherever possible for clients, and really using acknowledgement and championing, because when the client is change talking, then it's so much more powerful than when we're change talking. Again, I talked about the client advisory group and making sure that we're getting input throughout our office, getting input through paid experience with the clients to be at the table with us to give us their advice and their expertise. We have built recruitment and performance management strategies into our performance management system to ensure that there's a clear understanding of the clients that we're serving, clearer understanding of the clients that we're serving, as well as ourselves. And so Bridges Out of Poverty training is mandatory for all staff every 2 years, and it's mandatory for all new hires before they actually work with a caseload of clients. And for example, one of our performance management strategies has been a question on our call monitoring system says, did the worker make a deposit to the relationship bank? So again, really looking for those extra elements that are very much around the Bridges model. We've revamped our workshops to match the population we're serving. Happy to chat with that. We'll share our emails at the end. But we've increased our attendance significantly in doing those where clients are showing up. And without clients showing up, we don't have anything. We don't have relationship and we don't have outcomes. So attendance is a huge outcome for us. And again, I've talked at length about shifting from transactional to transformational case management, using the 11 essential resources of the Bridges model, using our coaching strategies and the tools that are shared in the Bridges Day 1 material to really apply and train staff at a deeper level to shift out of transactional case management and into a coaching relationship. It's a win-win all around. Modeling coaching, again, is also a win-win because the staff are feeling more involved, more valued, more a part of the process, that their voice is equal and heard. And again, that's what we want to do with our clients as well. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're really hoping that we will be a people-centered culture at all levels of the organization by the time that we're said and done this Bridges, if we ever get there, this Bridges journey that we're on. So with that being said, if we were in person, we would now have 5 minutes for Q&A. And because we are recording this and we will hopefully see you all in San Antonio to deliver in person, we don't actually have the Q&A open, but our emails are there in front of you. So please share and ask any questions that you may have of us.
I just wanted to say that that's awesome. And I'm sure that most people listening to this want to go right to your green slides and that last slide and say, okay, we need to do what they did in Peterborough. But what that is the result of going through the client life cycle, going through the theory of change, analyzing the resources of the organization, analyzing your partnerships and collaborative, and what is your piece of the research continuum and how you bring that to the community in terms of, are we just changing behavior? Are we changing community? Or are we addressing exploitation and policy as well? So I think that, Peter Drucker said, the need to act overwhelms any desire to learn. So we all want to be at the end there, and you have some tremendous outcomes and some tremendous ideas. And that whole idea that the life coaching of the staff with one another and as well as with the clients, that whole people-centered piece is the spirit of motivational interviewing that we talked about earlier. It takes a while to get there. It's taken your organization a long while, and it's ups and downs, and there's still challenges, right? But I think that we can honestly say that your organization used the structure that we have in the new Bridges institutional lens in order to get to the place you are now, and you're continuing to grow.
Yeah,
absolutely. Any ideas on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a continual journey. I don't think we're in the business of people, so I don't think you're ever going to check it off and say, oh, we're done. We're always going to be growing and learning and deepening the learning with the Bridges work. But we do hope that you have found this workshop beneficial and helpful, and we certainly hope that we see you in person.
That's right. And remember, we don't give up on people, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, hopefully this is the right workshop evaluation. If it isn't, I'm sure someone will let you know. But there is one here, and we hope that you do remember us, Terry Drucy Smith and Susie Johnson Smith. You don't have to have a hyphenated name with a Smith to be an institutional champion, but it's just a coincidence. I want to thank you, Susie, for everything that you've brought to this. And we thank you, Carrie, for being our tech person today. She doesn't want to be seen or heard, but we really appreciate that she's there. So, okay, there's our emails again. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Hope to see you sometime live.
Yes, take care.